Good morning. Welcome to the Thales Academy 2017 Big Questions Debate. This is going to be an exciting day, and it's coming soon. This coming Saturday, we'll gather at Thales Academy Rollsville and bring our best arguments to bear. Mr. Brady and I are working very hard to make this day a success, and I've made you this video so that you have all the information and all the resources that you need in order to debate well. My name is Josh Herring. I'm a humanities instructor at Thales Rollsville, and this year it's been a great joy to teach 10th grade logic there. So Mr. Brady and I have been partnering together to make this debate a success. In this video, I want to first go over some structural details for the day of the tournament, and then I want to move to discussing the flow of each round and how the big questions format works. Thirdly, I want to give you an introduction to some of the free will science terminology that is necessary for this topic. Before lastly, give you some suggested case strategies. Just in case you're wondering, who am I to give you any of those case strategies? I competed for 4 years with the Hillsdale College Speech and Debate Program. For most of those years, I was on the speech side. My last year, I spent a semester as a novice debater, and then went to the Pi Kappa Delta National Speech and Debate Tournament in Portland, Oregon, in 2011, where I ended up picking up a few different trophies for competition there. So I love debate, and I love helping other people get comfortable with debate. So that being said, let's start with some necessary details for Saturday's success. My main goal for Saturday is to make sure that our schedule runs on time. To that end, I'm asking everyone to be there for registration by 8:30 a.m. That's going to allow for traffic developments and anything to kind of give us a little bit of a buffer so that we can begin round one promptly at 9 a.m. We have several judges who have committed to giving up their Saturdays to come and debate, and it's key that we have everybody present bright and early. So please be at Thales Rollsville by 8:30 a.m. There will be a big registration table with signs telling you where to be, and as soon as we have everybody present, we will get the day rolling. Now, the morning we're going to have at least 2 rounds. We might get a third round in the morning, but by noon we'll break for lunch around noon, and then we will probably we'll have at least 2 rounds. We'll have at least 2 rounds in the afternoon, followed then by our finals round. So we have 4 open rounds for this tournament, and in the top 6 teams will have a finals round. And just so everybody's clear, if you make it to the top 6 teams, you probably will have an audience of the remaining people who are watching the debate for that day. Hopefully, if all runs smoothly, we will have our awards ceremony beginning about 3:30, and we will all be concluded and wrapped up by 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. I appreciate your commitments and your time and your efforts for this debate. Well, secondly, let's move on to discuss the flow of each round. Now, in each big questions debate, both teams have prepared both sides. You'll be assigned a side for your round. You'll either be affirmative or you'll be negative. Now then, the affirmative team goes first. They give their first constructive. They have at most 5 minutes for that speech. They're then followed by the negative team's constructive speech of no more than 5 minutes in length. After that, we have a questions time where the two who just spoke, can ask each other questions. Let me encourage you, this is a place where you can very much impress your judge by having excellent questions, by listening carefully to your opponent and asking great questions of their position. Bring your wider awareness of the topic to bear in asking your questions, and really help each other learn through great questions and answers. This is also a great place to poke holes at the logic of your opponent's case. If they have set up a foolish proposition, now you're not at rebuttal yet, so you would not want to necessarily start critiquing it exactly, but you certainly could ask a question to clarify, wow, that is not a sound or valid argument to be making. So please do use all of your time for questions and answers. After that first Q&A round, we have rebuttal speeches. Affirmative goes first. The main job of the rebuttal speech is to answer back all the arguments that the other side made. If you leave arguments standing and they're unaddressed, those are points for the other team that originally made that argument. The way competitive debate works, if your arguments are never addressed, those arguments are said to still be standing at the end of the round. They're called dropped arguments, and those count against you. Part of debate is not just marshaling evidence against each other, but it's answering back to your opponent. This is a dialogue. And if you don't answer back the other opponent, then their arguments are standing. And they really are. It's almost as if it's an election and an unopposed argument is running unopposed. And he, by default, is going to win the round. So, we've got affirmative rebuttal. You have 4 minutes for that. You have negative rebuttal. You have 4 minutes for the negative rebuttal. This is followed by another 3-minute question and answer round. After the second Q&A round, we have what is called the consolidation speech. The consolidation speech is where each team only has 2 minutes for this speech, and then your affirmative team, your job is to really tell a story of where the round has gone. Perhaps you introduced 5 main arguments in your constructive speech, but really 3 of those are not really that important, and you're willing to give those away and really hone in on 2 really important arguments. And maybe you bring some more evidence into this final 2 arguments. Negative team, same thing. Maybe you explain how the affirmative team really did shoot out your first argument, but your second argument is so important that this is where the debate must be. And you explain who has answered back and who has not answered back arguments, and move on. Following the consolidation speech, the consolidation speech, there's the rationale speeches, and these are the final speeches. Again, affirmative goes first, followed by the negative, same time allotment of 2 minutes each. During the rationale speeches, your goal is to explain to the judge why your team should win. This is a clear place to explain, Judge, today the affirmative team has made these great arguments. We have had solid evidence supporting our arguments, and the negative team has not responded to any of our arguments today. Therefore, we should win. And so on. Negative team could explain that really, Judge, the affirmative team is off topic, and because of that, we should definitely win because we are on topic with the resolution. Now, by the end of that, there's one important piece I have not mentioned, and that is your preparation time. Each team has 5 minutes of preparation time in between all rounds that you can use. If you finish the first round, but you need 1 minute to prepare for a rebuttal speech, you just tell the judge, Judge, I need 1 minute of my prep time. And then judge will make a note of that, and then 1 minute later, you stand up and speak. So your team, together, you have 5 minutes of that for each total debate round. So round 1, you have 5 minutes, round 2, 5 minutes, and so on. Use your time well. If you are scrambling if you need 30 seconds to come up with your argument, take 30 seconds. If you need 1.5 minutes to make sure you have something worth saying before you stand up, take 1.5 minutes. That prep time is yours, so please do make good use of it. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that you need to make sure you do answer back all arguments. There are 2 other things that you need. There are 2 other ways that you could easily lose the round. I want to quickly address. In the judges training video, I explained that these are ways to automatically lose the round. So I want to make sure you have heard that this is what your judges are listening for. The first way to lose the round is to be off topic. We are gathering for an educational debate that is centered around a particular topic that everyone is prepared for. If you are taking that topic and you decide to use that as a platform to explain your personal views on the use of dolphins for creating soap, for example, well, that may be a very significant issue that is important and worthy of time, but it's not what we're gathered here for this debate on this day. For this debate and this day, we are speaking to the resolution. Science leaves no room for free will. So, it's vital that your case be on topic. If your case is on topic, you are automatically the losing team, if the other team is also on topic. The final way that you can really quickly lose the round has to do with the very last speech, the rationale speeches, where you have that last opportunity to give the judge reasons you should win. The thing that you have to remember about the final speech is that you cannot bring up any new information in it, because the other team has no opportunity to respond to the latest information. If you've gone the entire debate round without mentioning the very important Stanford prison experiment, well, and all of a sudden in the final round you remember, oh yeah, I had that great point about the Stanford prison experiment, you cannot bring it in. If you do bring it in, that is an immediate disqualification from the round. So make sure you use your notes, use paper, use your iPad notes, and all such things to get all your important information out before that final speech begins. Once the final speech begins, there can be no new information given. So those are there are then three ways to really easily lose a debate round. The first one is to not address what your opponent has said and their arguments. That's called dropping a whole bunch of arguments. The second one is being off topic, and especially if the other team calls you, that's really easy to notice. Thirdly, it is to then bring in new information in the round. So make sure you don't do any of those three. Instead, make great arguments, respond to your opponent, and make sure you bring your information up in the proper order, and we have a great debate. Now, let me quickly just go over the four key philosophical terms in this debate and the positions that they express. I know I've covered these in Rollsville. I'm sure Mr. Brady has addressed some of these as well. These two are covered in the judges training video, so I want to make sure you have access to what your judges are exposed to and what they're looking at. The National Speech and Debate Association is the one that wrote this topic, and they really define kind of what we're debating about today. And they explain that there are four key philosophical terms in play in our resolution, which states, science leaves no room for free will. The first of those terms is called determinism. Determinism is a philosophical position that says all things are determined, by which philosophers mean are caused by prior events or forces. For the ancient Greeks, they often believed that everything that happened because of the gods. Well, modern-day determinists don't really believe in the gods in the same way the Greeks did, but they say everything is determined by different forces, the laws of nature, the different things that are related to physics and chemistry and biology. All these things determine our actions. So you might think you got up today and decided to put on that colored shirt, or in my case, I put on this t-shirt, but that event was not really a free choice in my mind. I was determined in that direction by a whole bunch of forces far more powerful and far larger than myself. That's position number one, determinism. Determinism says that there is no free will. Human beings are just determined by all these outside forces, whether they understand that reality or not. You can think you have free will, according to determinism, but you're wrong. Instead, actually, you are determined in what you do by all these external forces that are far greater than you could ever possibly be. The second philosophical position is called compatibilism. It's often sometimes called a soft determinism. Compatibilism looks at that deterministic argument I just laid out and says, yes, there's some validity there. There are clearly some large forces at play. For example, gravity. I cannot just decide to float. Gravity determines that I will be on the ground. That force keeps me on the ground. But at the same time, compatibilism argues human beings do make free choices inside these deterministic forces. Even though gravity forces me to be on the ground, I can still then choose to walk to the right or walk to the left. I can exercise a real free choice in the midst of these deterministic forces. So that's compatibilism. Compatibilism is trying to say both free will and determinism can coexist in some sort of relationship. Now, thirdly, there is the opposite view from compatibilism, and as you might guess, it is called incompatibilism. Incompatibilism rejects that both-and approach, instead argues that this must be an either-or. Either human beings are determined creatures, or we are creatures who have absolute free will that cannot be impinged by outside forces. You can't say both according to incompatibilism. If you've taken logic class, either in 8th grade or 10th grade, you remember the square of doom is what one of our teachers has called it, or the square of opposition is its more formal name. And you'll remember the arrow relationships and the contradictories that are talked about there. Incompatibilism and compatibilism are contradicting each other on the square of opposition. They cannot both be true. Incompatibilism argues either determinism or free will, while compatibilism says both determinism and free will exist. So, we've now worked our way over to the fourth philosophical term, and that is libertarianism, or libertarian understanding of free will. Libertarianism argues that actually human beings do have free will. We have these physical bodies that operate in certain ways and are certainly affected by outside forces, but that's not the core, the essence of what it means to be human. Instead, that core, that essence, is found in the mind or the soul. And the mind or the soul has the capacity for thought and reason. And because of that, we can make real choices using our minds, using our reason, and those real choices are our actual unique choices. Now, certainly there may be other factors in play, but for the libertarian, every human being, because he has that mind or that soul, however you want to consider that, depending on rationalistic or religious background. Either way, not to say those two things don't fit together, but that's how they're sometimes described. Either way, every human being has the ability to make choices, and those choices are real. Now, what's also at stake in this debate is the question of moral responsibility, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. But libertarian philosophy often tends to say that human beings have the highest level of moral responsibility. They have, because they make real choices, human beings are then responsible for the results of their real choices. As opposed to determinists, who have a really hard time understanding the questions of moral responsibility. Determinism looks at that and says, well, actually, you didn't really make that choice. All these outside forces combined and resulted in your actions. So it becomes really difficult to say, if this man murders someone else, but it's a result of all these external factors, and he didn't really choose to plunge the dagger into someone's chest cavity, well, how can we hold him responsible for that and either give him the death penalty or a life in prison or some other punishment? How can we hold anyone responsible if they don't actually make real choices? So, when we look at our debate resolution, resolve, science leaves no room for free will, this is really what we're arguing about. Is it the case that when we take science classes, as all of you have had to do, whether you're a middle school or high school, and we learn about things like Newton's laws of motion or Boyle's gas laws or the properties of genetic transference, do these things mean that we don't actually make real choices? And if we do make real choices, are we responsible for the actions that we make or no? This is a real question that is incredibly significant for us today in the modern world. Now, let me briefly conclude this video with some suggested case strategies. And I have 2 suggestions for affirmative and 2 suggestions for negative. Let's start with affirmative. Now, if I was arguing the affirmative case, I would want to run one of these 2 arguments. And these would both be my overarching arguments. Inside of these, I'd have my specific points and my different levels of evidence that I bring to bear, and so on. But argument number 1, if I'm on the affirmative side, which means I am affirming, resolved, science leaves no room for free will, I'm going to be arguing that I'm going to start by explaining what it means to be a truth seeker and a critical thinker. I'm going to start by talking about truth-seeking as necessary for human happiness, but critical thinking as necessary for evaluating what is actually true. Now, when we pair these together, we find that it is vital for human happiness that we actually seek truth and that we evaluate it critically using all of our rational faculties, which is often a painful process because it means we have to give up cherished beliefs that are, in fact, wrong. And then I'm going to transition into the topic of the day, arguing that, in fact, this whole belief of free will is something that science has shown us is actually wrong. This is an old superstition of the past that we need to let go of. Just like most rational people no longer believe in astrology or magic or spellcraft, well, so too actually science shows us that free will is an illusion that should be passed on and given up like any other such illusion. So that's then going to become my first overarching framework. I'm then going to need to prove within that how science is actually an illusion, and or how free will is an illusion, and how science is true. The second framework that I might run with begins in a different spot. And here I'm going to begin with arguing that determinism is the scientific position, and that all scientists are really deterministic in their thinking, and that scientists really make a great, they make a lot of efforts in proving, and then their work is studying the forces that determine our human behavior. And then I'm going to need to be able to show that looking at particularly the hard sciences, chemistry, biology, and physics. So, within those two frameworks, I think you'll find there's plenty of room to operate to operate within that framework as an affirmative side. But let's turn our attention to the negative side. Now, on negative, I also have two argument suggestions. The first begins in a different place than either of the affirmative arguments. In the first, I'm going to begin with Aristotle's distinction between essential and accidental properties, where essential properties are part of the essence of what makes something really what it is. You can't change the essence of something without changing what it is. And from there, I want to establish free will as an essential property of human nature, that all human beings have free will as part of their essence. And that then as part of this, this is where we then connect to the concept of moral responsibility. Because people make real choices, they are morally responsible for their choices. And I'm going to point out that our entire justice system accepts these premises. So if we're going to reject these premises, we need a totally new system of justice. We need a new answer for what do we do with the murderer, the thief, the rapist, who is clearly guilty. But if we reject free will and moral responsibility, we can't hold him accountable for those actions. Now, then I'm going to shift from that side of things to considering the fact that science is not this monolithic, univocal thing that can just say something. Instead, I'm going to define science as a discipline and science as a method where it's a way of acquiring knowledge and a way of studying physical phenomena. But that way of studying physical phenomena limits science in what it can say. Science can tell me a lot of things about how this mug was created and what happens if it drops and where the coffee that's inside it came from. Science can tell me all kinds of things about that. But science can't tell me if this is a good mug or if it is an evil mug. Science can't tell me if the mug has the properties of thoughts or no. Instead, those are questions of philosophy. Science, so I'm then going to raise the question under this framework of saying, can science leave room for free will or not? Not really, because science is not the sort of thing that can have a universal declaration about a philosophical topic. Instead, science can reveal some truths about human nature, but even those truths are not set in stone. They're subject to further experimentation. Then I'm going to end this section with reminding the judge that as the negative team, my job is not to prove that free will exists. All I have to do to win this debate is convince the judge that science leaves room for free will. That science allows me to both agree that science is real and free will exists. If I can do that, I should win the debate as the negative team. Now, on the second, I'm going to give you a second framework for the negative side, and that's this. Here, I want to begin where St. Thomas Aquinas begins, by asserting that human experience is a valid source of knowledge. Thomas Aquinas argued that God, in creating mankind, gave him multiple senses that are his way of interacting with the world. And those senses are real. My fingers really feel the air as I wave them. My nose really sniffs. I really perceive real things about the real world through the senses. And I'm not necessarily deceived when I rely on my senses. Well, if that much is true, then I'm going to then make the jump to say we all experience human free will. We have all had the experience of making a choice. Do I go to the right? Do I go to the left? Do I drive the car too fast? Do I drive too slow? Do I drive just right? We all have the experiences of making real choices and then wrestling with the consequences that come from them. Which is going to put me right smack dab in the libertarian position philosophically, where I'm then going to try to spell out an argument that the mind is different from the body. And the body may very well seem to be determined, but if it is, there is a higher force of human nature in play here, and that is the mind. And the mind governs the body. And this is where we can trace back our free will to. If we need a source for free will, well, that's the human mind. We reason and then govern our actions and make our choices based on how we process things in the mind. The mind then becomes the spiritual or psychological source for the physical phenomena that science is observing. Science observes that my body goes left, but it can't tell me why. It goes left, according to the libertarian philosophy, because my mind chose that I should go to the left. So, with that hopefully gives you plenty of arguments to practice and prepare. I am looking forward to seeing you all on Saturday, and I hope we have a wonderful day of excellent debate.